Hello, and welcome to the reading vlog of Carolyn Kepnes' You series, specifically of the sequels. This vlog was filmed between January and April, where my life fell apart while I was filming the vlog, so you can watch my slow descent into madness as I discuss, review, and spoil books 2, 3, and 4 of the You series, and tell you what I loved, what I hated, what I found absolutely absurd. Sit back, relax, enjoy. If there's a specific bit you're looking for, as always, timestamps are down below. Let's go. Hi, welcome to the bedroom where I've been living for the past almost 3 weeks. I've been really sick. You might be able to still hear it in my voice. I've been on antibiotics for a few days now, and I had bacterial pink eye in both eyes, and that's mostly gone now, so I at least look presentable, which I did not for several days. It was pretty horrific. Anyway, so I've started my reading of the series You. I had read the first book last year, I listened to it, and then I got books 2 and 3 from the library and book 4 as an advanced reader's copy. I feel very, very lucky for that. Book 4 comes out in May, so I figured what a better idea than to do a reading vlog of all the sequels, basically. I was going to say of the whole series, but I read the first book last year. So I am a quarter of the way through Hidden Bodies, so that's the second book, and I'm listening to it. It's the same narrator as in the first book, which I believe is also the actor from the show, and it's so funny. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. Okay, so what's happened so far? Joe, our narrator, has fallen for the woman who, at the end of the first book, shows up with a fake credit card to his store to buy a book. He falls in love with her and therefore gives her a job, because that is a normal, a logical thing to do at his bookstore where he has all these rare books. And then he gets into a very intense relationship with her, very intense, very lustful relationship, and they go on all these vacations and stuff. It's very, very exciting. She just keeps being a very obvious con artist, and at one point she just kind of sneakily is like, can you give me a key to the store? It would make me feel so happy and special. And so he does, and then he finds his store robbed of all his rare books, so she basically stole a bunch of books and then moves to LA to try and become an actress. So he decides to follow her, and that's kind of the first 15% of the book. That's the setup. So he has now moved to LA, and he hates LA because he is super pretentious. He is the most pretentious man in the world. He thinks he's above everyone else and he's above the law, and he hates all these fake LA kale smoothie drinker types. But he's trying to find her. He's moved to a new place. He's befriended his landlord and his neighbor and stuff, and he's going to these parties, and he's trying to suss out where Amy, the woman, might be. So he puts out fake casting calls that would appeal to her, but she's not taking any of the bait. But finally there's this horrible misogynistic comedian who makes an allusion to his girlfriend Amy, who eats blueberries in bed, which is exactly what Joe's Amy did. So he then decides that what he needs to do is to sneak into one of these comedians' parties, because then Amy will be there. He'll be able to take her aside and make it look like an overdose, and he can kill her and get his revenge on her robbing him and wronging him, because that is all this Southside man has in his life, is a drive for vengeance. I can't stop laughing. This is so dumb, and I love it. I'm having the best time. So he goes to this party, and the comedian's like, ooh, Amy's not here. She's up north visiting her parents. And Joe's really mad about it. So as the party's over, he hides and sneaks a bunch of Percocets into the comedian's water in order now to kill the comedian. But first he incapacitates him and interrogates him about Amy. And finally the comedian's like, she's not actually my girlfriend. I met her at a bar. She told me about this stuff, but she's not actually my girlfriend. We're not dating. Please don't kill me. Joe, of course, kills him anyway. Because that's just who he is as a person. He has this compulsive need to murder, and he justifies murder over the smallest stuff. Hydration break. Okay, so Joe has this like compulsive need for murder, right? So he kills this guy, and then he's like heading home, and he's pulled over by a cop, and he has a bunch of the guy's clothes in his backpack. I forget why. I have sick brain, so I'm not following all the details, but I am enjoying the ride. He has a bunch of the guy's clothes in his backpack, and he gets pulled over and like really mistreated by a cop, um, like comically and horrifically so, for jaywalking, and gets like a $400 ticket, and the cop keeps his headphones for some reason. Like he's like, okay, I didn't get pulled over for murder. It's fine. It's fine. So now he's back on his quest to try and find Amy, who he thinks is still in LA, but he doesn't have any good leads anymore, and he's like pretty mad about it. So that's where I'm at right now. That's about a quarter of the way through the book. I don't remember this happening on the show, but like I don't remember season 2. That was years ago. The second book is supposed to be season 2, and then the third book is season 3. The third book is like season 3 is the one where he moves in with Love, who is also a murderer, and then they have their baby, and he falls in love with the librarian girl. I remember that plot quite well, but I don't remember the season 2 plot, so I have no idea if this is new or not. But to my very sick brain, to my very sick self right now, don't get sick, kids. It's awful. Wear your mask. I don't even have COVID. Um, I don't have COVID, funnily enough. I'm sick with something else. Um, to my very sick brain, I have no memory of season 2 beyond the fact that that's where he meets Quinn, Love Quinn, and 40. And he kills 40, and Quinn knows about it, I think. It's roughly what I remember. So I'm excited to get to that part of the book. I'll make sure to be like kind of filming reactions and thoughts, but right now my main thoughts are it's really funny. And the audiobook is just like such a pleasant experience, especially because I'm sick right now. I'm like listening to it and either knitting or like playing games on my phone while I listen to it, and I'm having a really nice time. Um, okay, love you, bye. So hopefully next update I will be less sweaty and dying, and my voice will be back to normal. That's the goal, really. My eyes are now back to normal. They were bright red. The goal is to have my voice back to normal within the next few days. Oh my god, Joe Goldberg is such an idiot. He's the dumbest man. Throw out the whole man. Reading vlog for Hidden Bodies about 80% of the way through. Joel Goldberg is an idiot. I thought psychopaths were supposed to be smart. Okay, so I have zero memory of how Love finds out that Joe's a murderer, and then he finds out that she is either also a murderer or wants to be a murderer. I forget exactly. But that's about to happen in the book. I have no idea. I have zero memory of season 2. And I think in season 2 they're not actors. Like, is Love an actress and is 40 a screenwriter in season 2? Or was all of that left out? I feel like I just remember them being rich kids whose parents owned a vineyard. I have no memory of anything. It's really fun because I remember season 3 so clearly. So it's like I know the destination, but I don't remember the journey, and the journey's really funny. So I'm at that part of the book right now. I'm gonna get back to it. Hey, so I finished reading, listening to Hidden Bodies last night, and I remember nothing from the show, nothing, because the book is so different. Literally, the ending is different. The characters, a few of them have the same names, but like ultimately, a lot of the stuff that happens to them is super different. So spoilers will abound in this vlog. So one of the things that's different, for example, is that Joe ends up in prison at the end of the first book, which obviously doesn't happen in the Netflix show. Like, he has not been caught in the Netflix show even by season 3. So that was like pretty funny. The actor who plays Joe on the show is not the same person as who voices the audiobook, but their narration is so like similar and creepy that honestly, like, it's hard to tell. So my impressions of the series so far is, one, I'm really glad it got adapted to screen, and I kind of like that it's different from the books because it feels like it's set in an alternate universe. So, for example, in the books, Love
Quinn's family, like, they own a grocery store, and I think in the show, based on an article I read recently, because I wanted to look up the differences, she's an aspiring cook. I like vaguely remember that. And she's actually kind of like complicit in Joe's murders. Like, I think she actually like commits one. I might be wrong about that. But in the book, she's more just like, well, one, she is working on movies. Her brother 40 is trying to write some movies. Joe basically ghostwrites them, and 40 takes credit, which pisses Joe off a lot. And Quinn like acts a little bit, but also she does some charity work because they're just like really rich. They're just really rich and living in LA, living in a Malibu like summer house and stuff, living like their rich Los Angeles life. And at one point, Love figures out that Joe, while he's supposed to be looking for 40, ends up going to remove evidence from his past crime scenes all the way on the other coast, like outside of New York. So so she shows up at his door. She sometimes somehow like locates him through like credit cards and stuff, and she's like, "Who's the other woman? Who's the other woman?" And he's like, "Ah, there's no other woman other than the ones I killed. By the way, I'm a murderer." And she's like, "All right, I could deal with that. By the way, I'm pregnant." And he's like, "Sounds great. Can't wait to be a dad." So the book ends with him in prison being like, "It's fine because I'm rich now. I'm not going to stay in prison because I'm rich. And I'm going to be a father and I'm really happy about it." It's so silly. It's like it's so silly. I really enjoyed, so there's these interrogation scenes at the end of Hidden Bodies that were really fun because it was like the cops like poking holes in all of Joe's stories, and Joe's realizing that maybe he didn't cover his murder tracks as well as he wanted to because he's actually an impulsive idiot. Um, yeah, so that's the end of Hidden Bodies. I did start You Love Me yesterday a tiny bit. This I'm actually just reading the ebook, so I'm trying to narrate in my head with the same sort of cadence as the audiobooks have been narrated. And the audiobooks are just so good because like the text is really good, but I'm really glad I got to listen to those because it just kind of gives me a sense of how it's supposed to be read, if that makes sense. So yeah, I started For You and Only You, and it opens up with Joe being out of prison and basically Love has put a unofficial restraining order against him, and their son is now 14 months old, and Joe has not been able to see him ever since he got out of prison, thanks to the Quins. But then they also paid him off $4 million to leave them alone. So he's really, really upset about that. And he's just living in this small town off the coast of Seattle, I want to say, and volunteering at the library. And he's falling in love with the librarian, which is what we see happen in season three. Only in season three, he's in California with Love and their newborn son. So season three, I remember a lot better because it was a lot more recently. I have no idea how the book is going to diverge from here. I think it's going to be really fun, and I'm really curious as to how it's going to lead into book four. Because what I remember from season three that was like shocking is that at the end, well, Joe and Love are basically both killing people and kind of trying to take vengeance on each other, but also sort of still in love with each other, debating if they should stay for the in love for the sake of the baby. It's a whole thing. But at the end, I think the house burns down, and it's implied that Love was in the house and she burns with it. Joe gets to keep his son, and then he wants to go to the UK. And I know that the fourth book, the advanced reader's copy, is set in the UK. So I don't know if that's what's going to happen in book three. I'm really excited to find out. Yeah, this has been honestly choosing to speed read through, well, not speed read, choosing to read through the You series has been a really entertaining start to my year. I gotta say, it's very, very entertaining, and I think I saw some headlines that season 4 is filming. So I'm really curious as to, yeah, what the source material looks like and how that's going to be translated on screen. Um, so I'll let you know when I read more. Good morning. The sounds you hear are two cats purring, Plumes purring here in front of you, and Willow's purring over there behind you. So we're just gonna deal with the ambient noise. I need to work soon. I don't want to. Instead, I want to tell you how the third U book is going. I'm about 20 or 25% through. It's so funny. So, our narrator, Joe, has moved to this small town. He has his previous, not wife, his previous girlfriend, Love, who he has a child with, has a restraining order against him and isn't letting him see his son. So totally different setup from season 3, especially because he lives like in a little sleepy town off the coast of Seattle, like on an island, rather than in like a California suburb where he hates everybody. So in the book, he was living in a California suburb with Love and his son and their son, and he falls in love with first the neighbor and then the librarian. In the book, none of that happens. Okay, bye, Plume. Bye, baby. Okay. You get to see the cat's butt. What happens instead in the book is that Joe falls in love with the librarian at the library he's volunteering at. Hi. So Joe falls in love with the librarian, and he finds out that she's married. And she's married to this like washed up musician that was like a one-hit wonder 20 years ago and now mostly has a drug problem. And she's married with like a 17-year-old daughter. So Joe is now like, I'm gonna make her see that she should leave her husband and she and her daughter will be happier with me. And he goes about it in like the silliest ways. And he also has had one kiss with her because she is also attracted to him. Because Joe is very much a Ted Bundy type that makes you think that he's a, kind, conventionally attractive man, but he is not. So what has happened so far? Joe has adopted kittens. He's adopted 3 kittens and given them suffixes like tastic, licious, and rific. Those are the names of the kittens. And this is because the librarian wanted to adopt them, but her secret husband, she hasn't told Joe yet that she's married. She only told him like recently, but when he adopted the kittens, she was like still kind of implying that she was not married. Yeah, so he's adopted these kittens and he sends videos of these kittens to the librarian. And he's also going to Narcotics Anonymous just to creep on the librarian's husband who's there and like under a fake name. And the librarian's husband will show him videos of these kittens, be like, my wife's obsessed, I hate cats. But he doesn't know that it's like some guy, the guy he's talking to, who's sending him these videos of these cats. It's like super sketch. But Joe is like unable to refrain from being his terrifying self. He's literally incapable of that. So he like goes to stalk the house and the best friend of the librarian comes by and sees him with binoculars and she thinks that he's creeping on the 17-year-old girl. And she's like, you're a pedophile, etc., etc. I don't know if I can say that word on YouTube. So he ends up bashing her head in with a rock and locks her in the basement, as one does. And now he's texting from her phone. He's texting the librarian because his captive and the librarian are best friends. He's pretending to be his captive while also as himself trying to get drinks with the librarian, who finally tells him that she's married. And he's like, that's fine with me if it's fine with you. And she's like, Joe, no. And he's like, but Joe, yes. But Joe, yes. Also, I did get kittens. Actually, the scene's a lot more like her being like, oh, I can't believe I led you on. Like, you even got those kittens. And he's like, I love those kittens. They're amazing. She's like, the only reason I haven't had a divorce yet is because I didn't think a man like you existed. Like, you are actually a lovely person, unlike my terrible husband. Um, and it's like, yes, he comes off as a lovely, sensitive, bookish man who likes cats, but he is also a murderer. That's the problem. That's the problem. Anyway, this has probably been the most incoherent. Like, this reading vlog is just devolving. It's devolving fast. By the time I get to the fourth book, I will be a shell of a human. Okay, this vlog has just turned into a series of you being able to see my bed head. I had my hair like up in a ponytail, like just my bangs, and now it's like, oh, doing things. Anyway, welcome to my morning coffee. I finished the third book of You like 2 days ago, and I don't think I've recovered. I have no memory. Like, I thought I remembered season 3 really well, but given the amount of like elements that kind of overlap and then don't, it's like a little spicy. Okay, so what's really striking about the third You book is that Joe actually doesn't kill anyone. He actually doesn't go out of his way to kill anyone. However, 3 people end up dead around him. I need to fix my hair. All right, I've given up on the hair. Okay, so no one actually gets killed by Joe, but 3 people die. And the way they die is that one of them gets kidnapped by Joe, and then she ends up slitting her wrists while being kidnapped. The second person has a drug habit, and he is the husband of Joe's love interest. So when Joe and the love interest go off to frolic in the woods and do adult activities in the woods, and the love interest has initiated the divorce with the guy, he falls off the wagon and accidentally overdoses. Accidentally. And then the third person is the love interest herself, who accidentally and legitimately accidentally falls down the stairs, ends up in a coma, and eventually the plug is pulled. And that's actually what ends Joe's whole situation. Okay, and what's going on with love? So what I remember from the show is that the house is set on fire. Joe ends up with his son, and it's assumed that love is in the burning house, so that love is dead. And the show ended with the assumption that love is dead. But obviously there's no confirmation. We don't actually see the corpse. And what happens in the book is kind of similar, but kind of not. So Love, when she finds out that Joe has a new love interest, flies him into LA, into a hotel, and at gunpoint is like, why did you leave me, etc., etc. And he's like, why is my son not here? And she's just like, no, it's because you love him more than me. You don't love me. You just love your child, like, etc., etc. And she shoots Joe in the head. And then Joe wakes up in the hospital, having survived this gunshot to the head. And I'm just like, wow, Joe and Lisbeth Salander have something in common. He wakes up in the hospital having survived a gunshot to the head, and it's announced that Love killed herself after. So it was a murder-suicide situation. And Love's dad comes in, and he's like really upset with Joe and tries to strangle him. It's a whole situation, but eventually Joe gets to leave and go back to his little pseudo-idyllic life, to his love interest, and then the love interest dies a few weeks later. But again, we never see Love Quinn's body. We never actually get confirmation. Joe, whose perspective we're inhabiting, never sees Love Quinn's corpse, never has anything but other people telling him that she's dead. Welcome back to another edition of Discussing the You books by Carolyn Kepnes. over my morning coffee because I'm tired. So if I look extra pale right now, it's not even just lighting in the background, it's the fact that I had COVID. Whew, having COVID sucks. My chest hurts. I basically lost a week of my life and I barely read during that week. I was able to listen to audiobooks, but like actually physically holding up my Kobo was too tiring, and like turning the page was what's too tiring, which says a lot about how bad COVID knocked me out. I definitely couldn't sit up and read a physical book, but I couldn't even lie down and read my Kobo for more than like 5 minutes at a time. Um, so this vlog ended up being more extended than planned. But I did finally start the fourth U book. So I've been reading For You and Only You. I'm about a quarter of the way through, and I don't want to spoil too much, but let me give you the gist of the plot so far. Let's recall that at the end of the third book, Mary Kay, his librarian love interest, loved him back. And in that book, he didn't directly murder anyone. He did some terrible things that probably set up various people's death, but he didn't murder anyone. And he didn't murder Mary Kay either. She actually slipped and fell down the stairs, like legitimately. And she was in a coma because, of course, because we're here for the drama. So at the end of the last book, Mary Kay was in a coma, and at the beginning of this book, she dies. And Joe's like, well, there's no ties now because love is dead, and Mary Kay's dead, and Beck is dead. So basically, all his love interests are now dead. One he murdered, Beck. One killed herself, Love, and one died legitimately by accident, Mary Kay. To be fair, Joe orchestrated some of these accidents. Not on purpose, but the accident wouldn't have happened if he hadn't interfered with her life. I choose to believe this. So Joe now is like, nothing ties me to my past life, which I don't get because his son is still out there. Like, the son he had with Love Quinn is still just like kicking around and hanging out with like Love Quinn's parents. So that's like weird because he hasn't really been mentioned much in the first quarter of the book. Instead, Joe goes on a writing fellowship to Harvard. So he is being paid $25,000 a year to attend a writing workshop, um, reminding me a lot of the bunny setup. And I think it's probably just a typical way writing workshops are done, that you have a small group of people, and every week someone like you read someone's piece and everyone else kind of critiques it. And it's hosted by this writer who has one successful book called Scabies for Breakfast, which I've never said out loud. It's kind of funny. I don't know. So it's led by this writer who has one successful book, and there is another oddly named woman in the group. I am now convinced that Joe's interest in women primarily comes from them having an unusual name. Like, he is not interested in like a Michelle or a Carla or a Lucy. No, 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 no. He's interested. Her name is Wonder. Her sister's name is Cherish. Her sister's child name is Caridad, which is still funny to me. Okay, so he's now become obsessed with a woman in his writing group called Wonder, and he constantly refers to her as a Goodreads girl, because she's into Goodreads, and I find this very funny because I am also a Goodreads girl. He's like upset about it. He's like, he's like, oh, you're constantly on your Goodreads. And I'm just like, yeah, that's the best form of social media. I'm okay with that. Book social media is good. So I'm a quarter of the way through, and just not much has happened. Like, I am enjoying this book way less than the others in the series, probably because Carolyn has toned down, like, the obsessiveness. I don't know. It just reads a little, like, this might also be because I've been sick, but it's just not holding my attention. It feels a little repetitive right now. All that's really happened is we've had a lot of like exposure. We've had a lot of like Joe wants to get with Wonder. He likes her writing. Other people in the group also liked her writing, but the prof shut her down. He seems to be kind of undermining her. Um, that's kind of all that's really going on. The prof hosts a house party, and Joe and Wonder are supposed to like meet there, and then she stands him up, and he's like really upset about it. Because Wonder doesn't attend this house party, that results in the prof basically like turning against her and like giving her very vicious critiques when she's the one being criticized. But so far, the book's been a lot about just Joe being like, oh, Wonder, you and me were the same. Neither one of us are just college educated, unlike these Ivy League pretentious people. And like everyone else is like a fine character. It's always fun to read an unreliable narrator. This is what I am enjoying about the books, is that Joe is clearly like a terrible person and super in his head. But when you just objectively look at some of the actions he's describing that other people take, they're not like they're normal. Like Joe is the only one in this universe who's like he's like a problem generator. Um I'm not saying that like other people, other characters don't have their own issues, like they clearly do, and those are all things that Joe uncovers, but he is just so good at spinning things out of proportion and exaggerating people's flaws and exaggerating his own successes while being really insecure. Like it's very typical narcissistic um, sort of behavior. And I think that's really illustrated in the first quarter of the book so far. It's just not, it just doesn't feel particularly fresh having read the other three books. I guess that makes sense. It's been way like slower paced. Um, Also, Joe's book is called Me, like you. Like it's very like meta, and it sounds like he's like writing about his events with Guinevere Beck, like from the first book, but like obviously as fiction. Um, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. Oh, I really don't recommend getting the plague. It's a really bad time. It's been my first time having the plague, and I've not had a good time of it. Welcome to today's edition of Joe Goldberg. What have you done? What have you done? Okay, so I don't think I updated you guys that he has now killed his like creative writing prof, because the creative writing prof was being really mean to Joe's current love interest Wonder. Like he destroyed her in like the workshop. Basically, he said her pages were like derivative and all that kind of stuff. So Joe's like, well, you need to die now, because that is how Joe solves all his problems. However, one of the members of his writing workshop is really into true crime podcasts, and there is now a true crime podcast about events from book 3. And they're trying to figure out, okay, so in book 3, I forget if I summarized this or not, but Joe's like librarian love interest, her best friend picks up on the fact that Joe's a total creep, and Joe ends up like locking her in a basement, and she kills herself in that basement, and Joe dumps her body in the woods. So in book 4, the podcast is based on the fact that hikers have now found this body, and the true crime podcast is trying to uncover who the murderer is, and they're blaming all these people. And so the person in Joe's writing group has picked up, clued in on the fact that he used to live in that town around the same time. And then she starts looking into him and finds out all this stuff about him, and he's like, oh no, this is bad. So what he decides to do is to go into her remote cabin in the woods when she is away, like climb in through a window and try to find out what she knows. What he doesn't know is she sets a booby trap that releases like some sort of chloroform gas or something that knocks Joe out. So he wakes up tied to a chair, and she's like, hey, I know about everyone you murdered. And he like tries to talk his way out of it, and she's just not having it. She just has way too much evidence, like she knows what's up. So finally he confesses everything, and she just lets him go. So there's now someone who knows literally everything about Joe. Like he confesses to killing the workshop teacher person. He confesses to all the events from the past 3 books, including like murders from before. the time that we first met Joe Goldberg. So now he is walking around convinced that the cops are going to arrest him at any moment. So this man's paranoia is currently like bordering on hilarious. And he's just like, dang podcast. I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for the meddling podcasters. Um yeah, so that's really funny. I felt like the book was getting like so slow. Like honestly, it was pretty slow. Um I really like didn't like the first quarter of the book, I'd say, but now I'm almost halfway through and this development's really fun. Because Joe now obviously wants to kill the person that he's confessed everything to, but obviously he can't. And it's kind of like, okay, Goldberg, how are you going to get out of this one? Um, and I don't know, but I'm guessing it's going to be fun and creative. And Joe, as always, will think that he is the victim. And that's a lot of fun.
Hi, it's April, and I've been procrastinating on this vlog for 2 months. Largely because I finished the book in February, but I finished it like in the days in which my cat died. If you want to hear more about that, that's in another video. So I was just a little bit of a mess of a human, and I was always like, I should film this last part, but so now it's been a month and a half since I finished the book, and it's obviously tainted by the experiences I had while reading this book. I read this book while I had COVID and then finished it after the death of my cat. And I was really hoping, especially while I had COVID, that it would be distracting. Because I find the other 3 books were so engaging, so funny, so like could pull me away from other things going on in my life, but this one just wouldn't. Like there was just something about this one that I was like, it just didn't hit the spot for me. So I think in the clip you just watched, I got up to the point where I was telling you that there is now someone in Joe's writing group who knows all his secrets. And she blackmails him with this. And she just blackmails him into like telling the whole group that she's a good writer, to like spending less time with Wonder, like leaving Wonder alone, the love interest, and all these things. But she never actually like really acts on it. She also just like controls Joe. She has him over to her family house for like Thanksgiving, where he's like, oh, this is a great plan. It's time for me to break into her secret cabin where she has all the my confession tapes, and go fetch them. And she's like, yes, I know what you're doing. I'm not stupid. So it's a lot of this like fake cat and mouse stuff that really just felt like filler. And I think I mentioned that the original workshop writing prof died / gets killed by Joe as revenge for the fact that he was mean to Wonder. And his wife replaces him as the head of the writing workshop. Now, no one except the wife, Joe, and a few other people know that the wife is actually the one who wrote the deceased workshop leader's best-selling novel. So they think she's like kind of a terrible writer, but she's actually a really, really great writer. Just it was published under her husband's name, kind of thing. And she gets like pretty sour towards Joe because it's like she knows that Joe knows her secret. And then she does this thing that she gets her publisher to both endorse Joe's and Wonder's books, but changes them dramatically. So Joe's book, his book titled Me, which is like very meta, his book titled Me gets stripped of like all narrative content. And the word stripped is really important here because it's rewritten as like extreme erotica, and everyone's like, wow, Joe, I didn't know you had this in you. And Joe's like, that's not what this was. And he's like really, really upset, but the publisher is like, so you don't want us to publish you? And he's like, not like this, not under my real name. And Wonder has a similar issue happening, that a ton of her stuff was like pared down, rewritten. I don't remember all the details, but that essentially they have beef. They now have beef with the wife of the deceased workshop leader, who is now the workshop leader. And she seems to still take Wonder under her wing because Wonder doesn't like confront her about anything. I think Wonder doesn't even know yet that she's changed her book. She's just been like, hey, Wonder, your book is great. Let's publish it. Wonder's like, awesome. And she's like, hey, do you want a nice place to write? Come to like my vacation home. come hang out there. And Wonder's like, awesome. So she goes to hang out there to work, and Joe stalks her because Joe has to do some stalking, because otherwise is he even Joe Goldberg? So he stalks her down into her like little writing retreat house, and then he's like, look what she did to my book, look what she did to your book. And they're like very upset about it. And at some point, my memory's very hazy, but at some point Joe is alone with the workshop facilitator's wife slash the woman, I forgot her name, this would have been easier with names, the woman who's leading their workshop now. And he makes it look like she drowned herself in a jacuzzi, but she did not, because he murdered her. He did a second murder. And I forget whether Wonder finds out or not, but eventually Wonder just like exits left. And meanwhile, the other woman in the workshop who had all the tapes on Joe is like, I knew you'd kill again. This is so great. This is great food for my next novel. Because she is scrupulous and all she wants is Joe's story. And that is essentially how the book ends. Unless I crucially missed something, there was a lot here that just did not interest me, did not pull me in, did not sort of seem coherent with the last 3 books. I think what I was really hoping for and really expecting was the Quinns to return. Like, I am still convinced that Love faked her own death. I haven't seen the show. If that happens in the show, great. If it doesn't, also great. But just don't tell me, please. Don't tell me. I don't know if I'll watch the show. We'll see. But I was really hoping that Love would come back, that Joe's child would be mentioned more. But no, he just went on this ego trip, and it almost just became this spin-off book. It became a spin-off book that could really have been placed in anywhere in the series other than a couple of details. I thought the true crime podcast angle was so fun and was going to go somewhere, and then it just didn't. It fizzled out. I was really expecting more out of this book, and I ended up really disappointed, and I did give it 2 stars, which felt so bad because I got it as an advanced reader's copy. I reviewed it and I was like, I'm so sorry I have to give this 2 stars. I'm so sad because all the other books were like solid 3.5, 4 stars for me. So entertaining. But this one, honestly, I found it skippable. I don't regret reading it, but I'm highly, highly disappointed in it. And as you can see, like my enthusiasm for even doing the reading vlog, other than life stuff happening, my enthusiasm really went downhill as I was reading this book. I just did not connect with it. That said, I'm going to tell you not to read it. If you watched this far, if you watched with the spoilers, and you still think, yeah, that sounds like a good time, I want to see this train wreck, do it. Also, Carolyn Kepnes, I'm a huge fan of your work. I'm sorry I called this book a train wreck. I love you. If you're a completionist, if you like absurdity, if you do like the writing style, it is still in the style of you. But I don't think that it holds a candle to the previous books. I don't know if there's going to be another book. I kind of hope there won't be, but also I kind of hope there will be. I hope that the book I had hoped this one would be. It's a lot of hopes. A lot of hopes and dreams. I hope that something like the vision I had for this book will eventually appear, because if so, I'd be interested in reading it. But for now, this one, unfortunately, was a flop for me. And sorry to end the vlog on that note. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And let me know how far you've made it into the You series and how you feel about the books. When did it start going downhill for you? Because I feel like some people are like, the second one was terrible, the third one was terrible, and I found them great up until the 4th. So I am very interested to see sort of what the general consensus is among those of you who stuck it out through this reading vlog. Okay, yeah, have a wonderful rest of your day. Okay, bye.